We talk high school football, 4A, 3A, and 2A in Texas. We talk East Texas sports. We talk NFL, guy talk, movie, and booze. We also talk wrestling and so much more. So like and subscribe and check us out. And that means it's bug season. Heck, who am I kidding? It's always bug season in Texas. And that's why you need Grandeur Pest Solutions in your corner. They're locally owned and operated. They're trained, they're trustworthy, and they have a proven record as they have been in business for almost 10 years. They provide pest control against ants, bed bugs, bees, roaches, fleas, wasps, mosquitoes, rodents, spiders. If it crawls and you don't like it, they're probably going to take care of it for you. Now, they serve all of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they're locally owned. These two guys have been running this business since 2013, and every year they get bigger and bigger. But you know what they still do? They still have great customer service. In fact, if you get a hold of them, they're usually going to have your quote and your job ready to go within 48 hours. That's pretty good. Now, you can call them for a free estimate at 469-809-1769. You can find them online at Grandeur 4, that's the number 4, shore.com. You can also find them on Facebook. Just type in Grandeur Pet Solutions, and we are so happy that they're title sponsor for OutDrank The Coverage in 20.
Car Motor Company is your destination for classic and late model vehicles in North Central Texas, located at 302 South Caddo in downtown Cleburne. They have everything you're looking for, from classic cars and trucks to late model cars and trucks, convertibles, and SUVs. If you'd like to call ahead of your visit, they can be reached at 817-666-1111. With inventory changing weekly, there's a little bit of everything at Car Motor Company. Be sure to visit the website www.txcar.com. That's www.txkar.com to keep up with their ever-changing inventory. They're open from 9 to 5:30 on Tuesday through Friday, and at 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock on Saturdays, closed Sunday and Monday. And also, if you mention this advertisement and Texas 2 Seam during your next visit to Car Motor Company, they'll give you $200 off any vehicle purchase. Stop by Car Motor Company while you shop and eat in historic downtown Cleburne. Again, you can give them a call at 817-666-1111 or visit their website at www.txcar.com. That's www.txkar.com.
Hey, I mean, that was a good point.
I think we might start seeing some go back.
I could to change this situation. At my request, Bill Ussery, the highly respected former Secretary of Labor, has been working very hard in mediating this dispute. He has certainly gone the extra mile, and we all owe him our thanks. Players and owners still remain apart on their differences. Clearly, they are not capable of settling this strike without an umpire. So I have now concluded since.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first baseball OutDrank The Coverage look back. My name is Ryan Fox, and joining us today, as always, Terry Bennett and intern Noe the Pro. Gentlemen, how are we doing today, and what are we drinking?
Go ahead, intern Noe.
I'm doing well, guys. I am drinking something new. It's called Art of the Spirits. It's an American whiskey. It's finished in Madeira cask, and it's mostly rye, and I really don't drink rye that much. So it had a little bit of spice to it. Terry, this is one that your studio fiance, when she was in her bartender days, would have made a great old fashioned with. It's very strong. I had to put ice in it, and I had to water it down. But once I did that, it mellowed out the flavors. Cinnamon, caramel is really good. I like it.
I was about to say, you sound like you're 100% on board with this one, buddy.
Just drinking it straight, no. But once I put some ice and water, yeah, it's really good.
Gotcha.
How about you, Terry? What are you doing? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I am not drinking tonight. Well, I am, but I'm drinking Gatorade. I was sick. That's why we had to kind of move around last week's baseball Texas two-team happy hour. I got sick on Memorial Day, and then didn't really matter because then the power went out for a week at my house, and so I'm still kind of. In fact, if y'all hear me coughing, I apologize. I'm still kind of feeling under the weather, and I'm going to New Orleans on a scouting trip to check on the Saints to make sure I can cover it with taxes. No, we're going to New Orleans in a couple weeks. So I want to be healthy for that.
You know, you have a benefit of having your birthday and Father's Day right around the corner. I don't think that's fair. I think that should be outlawed. You probably
For
should
the
just
first 19 years of my life, and yes, you can deduce by that I had a kid way young. The first 19 years of my life, that didn't come into play.
Oh, well, now that it is, it's been a long time since you've been 19, so I think we need to
I was
change.
just about to say, oh dear God, it's been nearly 30 years since I was 19, just 19.
Yeah.
My daughter turns 30 this year.
Wow.
You're old.
And speaking of, that was 2 weeks after the MLB strike in 1994. No, really, my daughter was born in 1994. So, Ryan, when we talked to you about doing an OutDrank The Coverage, a look back baseball, this was one of the first things everybody kind of jumped on. So from a youngster's point of view, what do you look at and what do you think after you've been doing all this research for this strike?
Obviously, I didn't live through it, so I hadn't really heard much about it. And I'm surprised, like we were talking before we started recording, I'm surprised there hasn't been a lot made in the sports media world that this is the 30th anniversary of this, strike. It's the longest work stoppage in Major League Baseball history at 232 days. I mean, it carried over into the 1995 season. It shortened that season as well. But through the research of it, I understand where, on the player side, especially because at the time, with the thing that started all this was the owners, trying to set up a new collective bargaining agreement. Now, what started all this was in 1993 on December 31st, the previous collective bargaining agreement, which the MLB owners and the Players Association agreed on prior to the 1990 season, was coming to an end. So they had to, meet together and try to, come to a new agreement. And what the MLB owners were trying to do, they're trying to set up a salary cap and their argument was that they were trying to let the smaller market teams live, and that there has to be a share in broadcast revenue and all that. I'm not exactly sure how accurate that was, and obviously the Players Association didn't agree. I can kind of see what both sides of the argument were trying to do, but it kind of seemed like my biggest takeaway was that it was kind of more thinking about themselves more so than the bigger picture when it comes to the fans and what really drives the league. And that's, the fans, coming to the games and providing the experience and paying a lot of of course, the television deals bring in a lot of money, but the fans with the tickets, merch sales, concession sales, all that, that's huge. That's a huge part of each team's, income as well.
Noah, you had a couple smiles, so something elicited that response. What he was saying, what piqued your interest?
Well, I love baseball, but when I hear that, I just think about the salary cap in football.
Yeah.
And how that was used as the excuse for, parity and distribution of, like, making sure there was a level playing field. It worked in football, just didn't work in baseball.
And the funny thing is the people that were wanting the salary cap in football and the people that were, as far as owners, and the owners that were wanting it in baseball are on different ends of the spectrum. Because in baseball, it was the Kansas City Royals, the Milwaukee Brewers. It was those teams that really wanted a salary cap. In the NFL, it was Dallas and it was San Francisco. And people go, well, why? And I always explain to them, so Jerry Jones and Carmen Policy and them didn't have to sign anybody, but they could wash their hands of it and say, hey, we really wanted that third string linebacker. We couldn't afford him. And it's completely different
Wink.
now. Yeah, wink. and nobody's ever, it's really weird because Noe knows I've had that opinion since the day we met and first probably talked about it all in the very first 20 minutes we talked, because that's kind of how our life is. We're like two rain men bumping into each other in the night and we just sit and talk numbers all night. But I've been saying that the whole time. I never understood why people didn't understand that it was the rich. But I will disagree with a couple things with you on that one, on what you were saying. This was 1,000% only the owner's fault.
Oh, yeah.
The players in no way did anything wrong other than allowed the media and the owners to paint them as, egotistical, greedy, and all that. And the mistake, well, first off, the mistake they made was they had all the stars talking. And the idea I get is, okay, we want to show the strike and we want to show that our richest players are part of it and they're going to back up these other guys. This is the sum of all the good. The problem is the media and the owners got to joke, well, why is Tom Glavine, who drives a 1992 Maserati, why is he worried about $100,000? So they made that mistake, but everything else, the owners, man, this was all about what the owners felt that they should be able to get out of the players, and they put the fans right in the middle. And unfortunately, a large sum of the fan base bought into what the owners were saying, and that right there is what almost ruined baseball. Not the strike itself, but how the owners painted the players. Made it so hard for them to get back that fan base.
Yeah, and it seems that had a long-term effect on baseball as well, with a lot of the fans thinking that because of the picture that was painted by the owners, that it was mostly the players' fault. And that led to a big decline in attendance in games. Like in the comparison between the 1994 season, which was a regular year in attendance, a pretty good year, average attendance, it dropped 20% in 1995 as a result of the strike. They had over 40,000 people attending games, or nearly 50,000, and then it dropped into the 30,000s the following year on average for every team. So that's a big drop, 20%. And it's just I agree with what you're saying though. However, with the owners, it being their fault, because it kind of seemed like they were trying to cover up the mistakes that they were making, because baseball was financially was kind of just deteriorating at this point.
Well, okay, so that's what we're told. But again, part of the biggest issue I have with any of this stuff, and by the way, anybody wondering, I'm not always for the players. You've got to look at where the game is at when there's a player owner issue. If the game is going up and it's making money hand over fist, then I'm for the players, 100%. They need to be paid more. They're the product. But if the sport, say like in the NHL, when they had their biggest issue, they really were losing money. The players really did have to give up something because the league could not afford their salary. So I want to make sure. I'm just saying, in this strike alone right here, it was the players, that were getting screwed. And the funny thing is about a salary cap in of itself, it's basically billionaires who are probably very, very conservative with their money in every other way of life. But in this one thing, they've got to be a baby and they've got to put their little diaper on and go sit in the crib. They can't control themselves. And that's another thing that always blows my mind about owners. Oh, and the other thing, they've never opened the books. If I'm losing money and I go to you, Ryan, and say, hey, man, I need to borrow some money, I'm going to tell you exactly why. That's just how I'm not going to say, can I borrow $1,000? I'll be like, I need to borrow $1,000. I need to do this. And you can ask intern Noah, because I've asked him for money before and literally gave him, hey, this is what I'm going to do with this stuff. And so if I'm going to ask you to give me some money, I'm going to show you why. The owners would never show the books. And that just tells me that they had a ton to hide. They didn't even have to show like in depth. Just give us some basic profit margin stuff. And they wouldn't even do that.
Yeah. And that makes sense. And that just goes to show that they were trying to hide something, and the fact that they were doing that while while simultaneously trying to paint the players in a bad light, making it seem like the whole strike was their fault. Like, well, hey, they're walking out on the fans. You know,
Yeah.
it was their decision to walk out. It's not us. You know, that was BS in my opinion. I agree with you there.
Well, I will say this: the one good thing I think that this did is it showed baseball that they really couldn't do that again. And I know a couple of years ago they kind of did, but that was all COVID related. That wasn't, their deal was coming up at the end of that year, but everything was going smooth. And then COVID hit, and then they had to kind of figure all that out. But it showed them they couldn't do that again. And I think it showed other sports they couldn't do that again. I don't know how far football would drop, but I think the one thing that could cause football to trip itself, other than just market saturation and eventually everybody gets tired of something, is that they have a long labor issue that knocks off a chunk of the season or something like that. And so I do think that the sports world realized through this, we can't do this anymore. We've got to figure these things out behind the scenes, get the deals done.
You know, two things. One, we're all wearing blue shirts. And two, you referenced hockey. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love those shirts, by the way. I wore it when I got it, and it fits perfectly. I love the way it feels on me. It's a good fit.
Yep.
Yeah. I should have wore it today. Thank God.
Shout out to Mallory Prince for these shirts.
We're going to be getting some more from there. But anyway, what were you saying, Noe?
Well, the other thing, you referenced hockey, and that strike was in the 04-05 season.
Yeah.
It canceled that entire season.
Yep.
But the season prior, the 03-04, the Stanley Cup final was a team from Canada versus a team from Florida.
Oh, wow.
20 years later,
wow.
got a team from Canada.
30 years later. Oh, 20 years, you're right, from 04. Sorry, my mind was going 20. Yeah, you're right. Congratulations to the Oilers. I wanted Dallas to make it, but I even messaged you when we were talking Game 6. I said, hey, I really want Dallas to win, but if not, Florida, Edmonton, that's going to be a fun series. And I think it will be a fun series.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. Edmonton, I don't know if they found their defensive groove against the Stars or it was just luck. But I would like to see their offense versus Florida's defense because Florida has a really stout goalie in Sergei Bobrovsky. So curious to see how – and they also have stars, Kachuk and them. But, I'm just curious to see what's going to happen, which one will prevail. Will Florida's defense prevail or Edmonton's offense? Early prediction for me, I think Edmonton in 6.
I got Florida in 7.
You think they're due for it because of what they did last year.
Yeah.
And the year before that, they had a really good team. They just flopped in the playoffs. Edmonton, I mean, they're just – it almost feels like Gretzky and Messier back in the early to mid-'80s where they were just creeping at the door, and then now they finally broke through.
Yeah, but the difference is the West is extremely deep, so they could easily be a first round and out next year, even if they won the Cup this year.
Correct. Just like what happened in Colorado. Just like what happened in Vegas.
But then, that's just how it's going to be. And there's Dallas. You speak about that. It took Tampa Bay a third time. It might take Florida a third time. And if Dallas could get to it next year, that'd be their third time in this run. But anyway, back to the strike stuff. What do you remember, Noe? I actually meant to say that. What do you remember, Noe? Because like you said, you've always liked baseball, but you weren't like, you didn't play league baseball. Like I played baseball. My whole summers were wrapped around baseball 99.9% of the time. But for you what were you, 11 when this
10.
happened? 10. 84. So you were 10 when this happened. What do you remember of it, if anything?
Oh, I remember a lot because this was, like I said, 93 was the year I watched everything. So I remember Toronto versus Philadelphia, World Series 93. I remember the last year at the old Arlington Stadium for the Rangers. There's a lot of stuff I remember from that year. And then going in 94. Oh, nice timing.
There we go.
94 I remember a lot, and I know we're going to talk about a lot of it, like the big topics where what happened with the Expos and that farm system, and then that big trade where they got Pedro Martinez, and they just became this monster team. They struggled out the gate. I think they only won like 4 games after the first 2 weeks, but they won a tear after that. I remember just them having a great season, but then I remember the individual things. I remember, well, okay, the other team part of it, nice. The other team part of it I remember was the fact that there were 14 teams in the AL, and the top 10 teams were not in the AL West. So
Yeah.
the four worst teams in the American League were in the AL West.
Yep.
Well, the Rangers led the AL West, and they were 10 games under 500.
Yeah, and
That tells you how that was.
I don't think there's ever been a team that's won a division with a losing record. That could have been the year unless the Rangers just went on a roll.
Would that not have been the most Rangers way to finally clinch their first division? Because even when they clinched their first division a few years later, they didn't do it at home. And in fact, I don't think I think that's one of the weird things about the Rangers' history is they haven't clinched a lot of great moments at home. It's all been on the road.
Yeah, the only one I can really remember, I think, is the 2010 ALCS.
Yeah, against the Yankees.
I think I remember them winning in New York, or not winning in Arlington. So
And they
outside
might
of
have
that,
won the Detroit one too, but that one was kind of anticlimactic because Texas jumped on them so quick.
oh yeah, the big blowout. Yeah.
But yeah, so my part of this story is in 1994 I had moved up to Dallas, being a big Ranger fan. It was that first year, well, even a couple years after, but mainly that first year, like I probably went to 15 home games, 20 home games, because when the park first opened, it had the same rules as the old park where you could bring your own food in. And so you could go, hang on real quick. You could go get a center field seat for $5 a person. So,
Wow.
and my daughter could get in free once she was born and the next year, but just for at the time, me and my ex. And so it was $10. You could go get a Subway sandwich. And back then it was 2 for $1 footlongs. I mean, you could do all that, even driving over from Dallas, and it'd be $35. And so for us, I loved baseball. She didn't mind. She enjoyed the atmosphere, and it was cheaper than going to a lot of other things in Dallas in 1994, for a young couple that doesn't know what they're doing. And so it was, and I was a big Ranger fan, but it was a fun year, even though they were terrible. They were fun, terrible. And everybody, it was kind of like, yay, we want to win, but no, we don't want to do it this way. And I don't think they would. If the season plays out, the Angels were really, really beat up at that first part of that year. They would have, I think they would have eventually got enough to finish 5 to 6 games over, 84 and something and that type of thing. I don't think the Rangers would have stayed in it, but that would have been the most Ranger way.
Well, you remember the next year, I think, wasn't that the year where the Angels had a big lead over the Mariners, and then the Mariners made this big comeback the last month of the season?
Yeah.
And overtook them. So yeah, I could easily see. I mean, the Angel team in the '90s were really good, especially toward the end of it. So,
that's been the Angels for the last, outside of a few little bumps. That's been the Angels for the last. They're kind of like the Pittsburgh Steelers of the American League. They're always hovering around, and they rarely just completely have terrible years. But they've yet to break through and finally, outside of the World Series, since then, they've yet to break through and finally, go further than the first round. So that's the one thing you got to tip your hat to them, that they've done a good job of staying relevant, at least, even on the bad times.
That was a team I never hated either. Like I always liked a lot of their players on their team, like Jim Edmonds and Tim Salmon, Chuck Finley, Mark Langston was one of my top 5 favorite pitchers as a kid at that time.
Yep. JT Davis. So, that's a good point, though. As a Ranger, until the Astros got into the West, who would you have considered the Rangers' biggest rival in the West? The Angels? And that would have only been because of the, 2010 to 2017 range where both of them were, trying to outdo each other. But I mean, the Mariners, I don't think any of all the years that they've played together, I don't feel there's any real connection to any of these West teams.
I would say in '94, if I have to pick one of the 3 other teams in the division, I would have said
Just
the Mariners.
in 94?
I mean, just in '94 going forward, probably the Mariners. I think the Athletics, they kind of had to. That's a team that's historically always had a low payroll. So anytime they had good young talent, it was just only a matter of time before they left. in that case.
Not as much back then. I mean, you're still fresh off the Bash Brothers team, and they were still trying to win and trying to compete. They just didn't really know how to. In fact, a couple years later, they ended up trading for Ruben Sierra. And that's what brought Canseco to Texas. And they were kind of like the Angels after they had their big run and then they fell off. They weren't great, but they weren't like, a 50-win baseball team. They were still winning games. But yeah, you're right. Overall, in general, though, the Oakland Athletics historically.
When I was watching at this time, it was 93, 94. 92 was the last good year for the Athletics for that decade. After 92, Ricky Henderson left for Toronto.
Yeah.
Canseco left for, I guess, Texas.
Yeah, he was traded in the Canseco trade.
And then all their starting pitchers, Bob Welch, Dave Stewart, not Jose Rio, but all their other starting pitchers, they started getting older and not as good. So they just started. So some of the good players left and the other players just aged out.
Yeah, that's basically how it went.
So when I knew the Athletics at that time, I just thought they were just a bad team. I didn't know they would be good until 2000 when they had Giambi and all of them, and they had that awesome pitching staff. Also in 94, I also remember, and we're going to talk about them, Tony Gwynn chasing the 400 batting average mark for this season. Matt Williams, I really feel that Matt Williams was going to break Roger Maris's home run record. I believe it was 61 at the time. I really felt that he was going to break it. The Giants were not having a great season. They had the great season in 93 where they won over 100 games. Widely still to this day considered the best team that never made the playoffs. The 93.
We'll eventually have a look back on that season.
Yeah, because that was the last season before the wild card got introduced. So, prior to 94, it was 2 divisions per league, and the winner of each division played in the league championship series. There was no divisional round. There was no wild card, no nothing. So this was kind of a big year in 94. You went from 4 teams making the playoffs league wide to 8. So you're doubling in size. Bobby Bonilla is getting paid by the Mets. Where in 2024, he's still getting paid by the Mets. So some things have remained the same. But so yeah, that.
So
a couple of things people don't talk about before you want to say something, and we're going to talk about it in 95 when we go to the replacement players part. There was a possibility that Cal Ripken Jr. would not have broken the consecutive games record if replacement players had played in 95. And Don Mattingly, you talk about the 94 Expos. The 94 Yankees also built a great farm system. That Derek Jeter guy was pretty good. But this was Don Mattingly's best chance in 94 to actually make the playoffs. He was the unfortunate guy that came onto the roster in 82 right after they made their last World Series appearance in a loss to the Dodgers. His teams were somewhat okay to not good from 82 to 93. 94, they finally break through. He's still relevant. They got a good pitching staff. They're young. Buck Showalter's fiery guy. And then the strike happens. So I thought the Yankees and Expos were on a collision course to the World Series. It would have been a very interesting looking World Series, but it would have been very star-studded and young.
Well, let's talk about the Expos then, guys. Again, Ryan, you've been doing lots of research for this because, as you talked about, you weren't around. When you look at some of that Expo highlights stuff, it's amazing just how good that team was.
Yeah, especially I think that pitcher they had, Ken Hill, I think was his name. He was having a Cy Young caliber season. All those, they had really good offense. They were six games ahead of the Braves in the NL East. As you can see right there, there were 34 games above 500 when the strike commenced. I think not the franchise history, because the franchise has moved to Washington at this point, but in the time that they were the Montreal Expos, this was leaps and bounds the best team they ever had. And the fact that they got this potentially historic season cut short. It's honestly a travesty. It kind of makes me ponder the question, would this franchise have ever moved to Washington if that season would have commenced and they would have possibly at least made a World Series appearance? I'm
I mean,
not.
I don't know if it's Washington. Would they have? I don't know. It's real easy to put this in a little box of, because they didn't do it, they didn't get the
Yeah.
stadium. There wasn't a guarantee that if they won, they got the state. The whole thing was they needed a new stadium. The
Yeah.
stadium they played in was built for the Olympics. It was not a great stadium, even in play.
Yeah.
And so it was vastly inferior to every other one. So for them they were like what Tampa Bay is now at this point. They were really solid at building up their club and having these guys ready to go at contract. So if the Expos, let's say they win the World Series, I don't really know. I still think that eventually, even if they get a stadium built, it's not like we're not talking about a Montreal fan base that packed it in, with 2 million. Like when Cleveland Browns left, it had nothing to do with attendance. With Montreal, a lot of it had to also do with attendance. Yeah, they were there when they were winning, but they weren't there enough when they were losing. And so that, like with the Ranger fans, at least until they finally won. And I contend that the Rangers winning has kind of broke one of the things they used to could get a bye with, in that the fans would still come to the Rangers even if they weren't great because they were fun to watch. It's a summer outing. It's Major League Baseball. All that kind of stuff was ahead of winning. Well, with Montreal, it was either they're winning, we're there, they're not, we're not. So I don't know. I guess it depends more on how much would they have fought to keep the team together, and if they go on and win 2 out of 3 World Series, or they're in 4, then you start going, okay, that might have saved them. But that's an extra addition, because this same team was in '95 and they didn't do anything. So
Whoa.
Well, I mean,
Whoa,
and whenever
whoa. It was
whenever
not
they
the same team.
I was trying to see if I could get that past Noe, but I couldn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, 'cause when they coming up on that, proceed the next spring training, I'm trying to say, and prior to the '95 season, they had 4 top players walk, like the aforementioned Ken Hill. He left. Larry Walker, John Wetland, Marquise Grisham. That was their 4 highest paid players, and they were all 4 gone.
And 2 of them ended up in Rangers in prominent roles.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Ken Hill, Ryan, because I remember him. I remember him as a Expo.
Yes.
Vaguely remember him as a Cardinal, but I really remember him as a Ranger. He was a very solid pitcher for the Rangers for a number of years.
Yeah, he was only there 2 years, shockingly enough, but he was one of the guys that anchored their playoff team. Excuse me. And he was really solid. Again, the problem that we had with them was we didn't have that ace on top of that. If you'd had an ace on top of that staff with John Burkett and Ken Hill and that group, then you're talking about that's a World Series type pitching rotation. But yeah, going back to Montreal, I think they do win the World Series this year for sure. And again, does that allow them to keep those? I don't know. I want to go back though. You said Matt Williams, you think he would have made it. I agree. He had 43 home runs with 47 games left. He only needed 19 more to break the record. I mean, yeah, he'd have had some bad slumps. They'd have stopped pitching to him, but I still think he would have got it. To me, though, the more interesting one is Tony Gwynn, because I do think that Tony Gwynn, we lost maybe now looking back with especially how baseball is played now, and I know things will change, but we might not ever see anybody can get close to 400. And in fact, 394 might become a magical number in of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I was just going to point out that he would have at least had a chance to become only the second player in MLB history to finish a season with a 400 batting average. The first was Ted Williams. But yeah, it's just the fact that he lost that chance, just lost the opportunity to even try to do that it's a shame. It's one of many things that, was taken away during the season, including the Matt Williams, Roger Maris chase, like we mentioned before. But I mean, 394 batting average is ridiculous. Even back then, I think the as far as today's players goes, probably the best player that has a chance right now is Luis Ariz, and that's just because he puts a lot of balls in play. Big singles guy. I think his batting average is in the 370s or the 380s right now. So if there's any player in today's game that can even remotely come close right now, it's probably Luis Ariz.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Gwen's a lot like Ichiro. He was a slap hitter when he didn't really need to be. But I mean, again, you're talking about an era where I'm not saying you preferred the single to a home run, but the idea is I'll take the guy that's going to be on base 3 times that gives us more chances to score over the guy that'll hit a home run, but it might be one every 4 games, 5 games. If you hit a home run every 5 games, you're breaking records. So you see my point? Now it's the exact opposite. I was literally going to ask y'all, I don't know if Tony Gwynn could have a secure spot on a team in today's baseball.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
he
a little
wasn't great
different.
enough defensively. Go ahead.
Yes. His defensive ability, like even with his weight gain as he was getting older, he was still really solid defensively. I just feel like he would have had a place somewhere. He was just so good at getting contact with the ball and just getting on base that they would have probably placed a power hitter right after him in the lineup just because there's an opportunity to get him home. I don't know, man. It is a good discussion to have. I've not thought about it. I'm going to go ahead and say yes, he would have found a spot in today's roster just because you could put a power hitter or two
Well, and
after
I
him.
do want to say there's kind of rules to this. And I know it's fantasy, but we're guys. This is what we do. Are we talking about we drop Tony Gwynn the way he played in '94 and you just time warp him and you bring him to today? Or are we talking about Tony Gwynn that grows up in this style of play today? Because I think Tony Gwynn would have turned himself into a power hitter, a Corey Seager type power hitter, not where he's hitting 60 home runs, but you can lock him down for 30 and 95 RBIs just yearly. I think I think anybody that has the eye-hand coordination to hit like that can hit in any era. It's just how will he fit into that game in that era, because it's a puzzle. You can't anyway, it's one of those fun things to talk about. People forget about how good Matt Williams was.
Yeah, I liked him a lot. I loved his batting stance where he would do his little thing, but it was like he was licking his jersey every time he was like going into his little windup. I don't know if you remember that, but he would always do this.
Yep. He finished his career with 378 home runs, 1,200 RBIs.
I remember he got a World Series ring with the Diamondbacks in 2001.
Yep. Yeah, he actually, people think that he was only with them for a year or two. Heck, he ended up playing 5 years with them.
Oh, wow. A lot longer than I thought.
I just always thought that, boy, I bet him and Will Clark were a lot of sourpuss fun in that locker room.
Will Clark had the weirdest mannerisms. If the TV ever caught him, like at first base, just chilling right before a pitch, he would have all these weird facial expressions. I kind of wish I brought that up to y'all so you could just find some clips of it. But yeah, it was. I loved him as a player, especially with the Rangers. He was a really good player and a really good.
If Will Clark played in today's era, there would be a YouTube channel called Will Clark's Ticks.
Yes,
I mean, 'cause he's right. He always he would just I don't know. He somehow looked like a 25-year-old and a 75-year-old all in the same face. It was weird.
Even like the early years with the Giants, like in the late '80s when they were competing to go to the World Series, he was like that all the time. Like he just looked like an old man, but he was a young guy.
Had the personality of an old man.
He's very crotchety.
Yeah, very crotchety. But yeah, so people forget about that. Also, people forget about what the Rockies were doing that year. They were still playing in Mile High Stadium, and they were on their way to breaking a ton of single season MLB attendance records. This was back when it's so funny now to think about that because of how lethargic that fan base is now. And not that I don't blame them, but it's also not like the Rockies have been, oh my God, terrible. They're kind of in that unfortunate middle where sometimes they're good enough, but sometimes they're not. But back then, this was when the Rocky Fever was at its highest. And, that's another one of those little things. How does that maybe change their path going forward?
Yeah, that is a good point.
Because 95 was ugly. I remember that. 95 was ugly. And we can kind of transition into talking about where we are. And I'm taking charge now because I was old enough and I was working a job where I was listening to the radio through all this. And so I mean, this, and this is again at a time when my baseball fandom was probably at its highest as far as what I followed, not only with the Rangers, but just baseball in general. Like I'm the guy that watched Baseball Tonight on ESPN every night back then. In fact, I think that's the year it debuted or close to it. But anyway, so you've got these owners. They just decided, they're screwing it. They're tearing up the league and they're going to get replacement players. And I'm going to tell you what, I was young enough. I thought about it. Just to go try out and just to see what it was, what it would be like and stuff. But I didn't because I didn't like it because I don't know. Maybe it's living through the 87 replacement thing with the NFL. Now, one thing baseball did have is they were going to have an actual, a regular full spring training. And, it wouldn't be like these guys are just coming out literally after working a bricklaying job and playing baseball the next week. But man, you want to talk about specialized skills in baseball. I'm not talking about athletically, but throwing the ball and hitting the ball is so highly specialized that the difference between the best and even just the very good is so wide that it's going to be really hard to watch just the very good.
Yeah, completely agree. I'm glad that never happened. It was pretty close to happening, a lot closer than people think.
Oh, I bought tickets to opening day because I was like, screw it. I'm either going to get to see the Rangers and I can at least claim this as I've seen the Rangers on opening day, or I'll, it at least gave me tickets for later on in the year. But yeah, I bought tickets. Yeah, this wasn't something, I mean, the owners, I think that speech that Clinton gave was February, maybe?
Yeah, February of 94, yeah.
Yeah.
Or 95 rather.
95. I mean, we're talking about, in fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think replacement players went to spring training.
Yes.
I think they had already started. And so
and they were guaranteed $5,000 for reporting to spring training, and then an additional $5,000 if they made the opening day rosters. So there's quite an incentive for replacement players to come out. And there were some, I don't know how many there were entirely, but Kevin Millar, a guy who played in the Major League Baseball for 12 years, he started off as a replacement player. And
that is so crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and he has talked about that even after the Red Sox, and even after that, there are some players from that era who are very chilly about him, like from the Red Sox and stuff that were they consider him, he crossed the line. And so, yeah, it was contentious. It was really contentious. You're going to get that anytime you got scabs performing, whether it be baseball, whether it be welding, whether it be whatever.
That's a good point because I really haven't – because I remember interviews with him and stuff he's been on. He has a great personality. He's very well spoken. And I just felt like he would be having his own podcast, or I would have heard of it by now. But I really don't hear much of him lately. So I'm not sure if he just decided to have a quiet life.
Yeah, or maybe it was. I mean, like I said, he wasn't shunned, but he just talked about there were still people that just were. He could tell they were chilly to him, and he knew why. And he didn't. He goes, I'm not going to make a scene about it and stuff. And that's just the way it is. But because again, let's go back to what we talked about at the beginning with the owners. I mean, that's what they did. The one thing the owners did was their PR painted the players as rich and greedy, and the players again hurt themselves. You don't bring up Tom Glavine and Randy Johnson and people like that. You bring up your Mark Langston. Well, even Langston was still good. A Dean Palmer. I'm just throwing a Ranger name. A Ken Hill. Bring up players who are good, but they're not seen as the upper echelon. Have them push your message. If you've ever noticed, the one thing the NFL players do right is usually your rep, your union rep is usually not a star on the team. Like in fact, usually at the end of training camp, football season, usually there's 3 or 4 union reps that get cut because usually they're the backroom guys, but they're the face of your players union. People can accept that. They don't want to see, Patrick Mahomes talking about the need for more money. But if they see it from the third string right tackle, that hits home. And the same thing with baseball. But the other thing it did is, again, it blew up in their face afterwards because 1995, people didn't want to go to the game. Even when the Stars came back, people didn't want to go to the game.
They all wanted to listen to the O.J. Simpson trial.
A little bit, not too far on that, but
that basically dominated 1995 from January to October. That was the whole trial.
But that was during the day, and then you can go to a game at night.
I'm just messing.
No, but you're not wrong on some of that. But I can remember them dropping tickets down to like $3 in the outfield for a while there in 95.
Wow!
And so it was
an incredible season, or just an incredible year in all of sports. Really, to be honest with you, I'm just thinking of. I remember the Indians were really good in 95. I think they even won 100 games, considering the fact that they only played 144. They still got to 100 wins. Wow. That was a crazy good young team.
Let's go to I'm going to pull up the 95 standings.
But yeah, I'm just glad because Cal Ripken was able to break Lou Gehrig's record in 95.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you think? So this is supposed to be the beginning of the healing, was Ripken, and then we'll get into. By the way, we're going to promo something we're doing in August because we're going to kind of have a part 2 of this because we're going to talk about the ramifications of the strike, which led to the PED era. But
what really brought fans back in?
What really brought fans back? Exactly. Well, that's my point. How much? Because I don't think the Ripken thing. I think baseball tries to make it seem like that's the pendulum moment where people came back because they don't want to admit what it really was, because the Ripken thing was cool. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't. I mean, okay, it once that game went official, it's okay. That was it. Nobody didn't stay for the next game. So I think Major League Baseball tries to flower that one up with the ramifications of what it did to the fans, because I don't think it brought back hardly anybody.
Yeah, I think 96 helped with the Yankees finally breaking through and winning the World Series. But then you see the Marlins winning it in 97, and then they just blow up the team the very next year. But the saving grace was what we're going to talk about later this year, the PED era in 98, the home run chase and everything in the background that led to that. And in 96,
the best era of baseball, in my opinion.
It was the what era?
Best era of baseball, in my opinion.
I mean, people they became local celebrities, like not local, like international celebrities. The people knew these guys because of the home run chase, Mark McGwire versus Sammy Sosa. I think a year or two before this, Ken Caminiti won the NL MVP with the Padres.
Yeah, that surprise World Series team.
I mean, when you really think about it, it probably saved baseball because of, like we talked about earlier with kind
PED?
of what?
The PED era?
I think so, because when you look at...
you're not wrong. I was just making sure. Yeah.
Because like we were talking about earlier, the fan reactions to the strike itself, like we talked about the 20% attendance drop in baseball. And, I'm not sure if there's much of a slow climb up or much of a decline. They were probably kind of treading water for that 2 or 3 year period there. And then when the steroid era came up and then the home run chase happened, like you said, that's what brought the fans back. And, there might have been talks back then. Again, I don't know for sure, but there could have been talks or thoughts that, the strike could have completely killed baseball to where it would have been too much to come back from. But the fact that the steroid era happened, not too long after the strike, I think it might have saved it. Because of this,
it 100% did. But I will say this. Also, what brings back fans after things like that is their own teams doing good.
Yes.
And so you look at like 1997, Baltimore was back. Baltimore had been kind of treading water. Cleveland still in the high arc of their, they just played in the World Series. They were still really good. Then you've got like in 96, the Texas Rangers win their first title. that brought a lot of the North Texas and state of Texas base. Because again, this is back when the Rangers and Astros weren't in the same league. And so at someone like me in East Texas, I'm still rooting for the Astros and the Rangers at the same time. But that 96 team brought back a lot of people for the Ranger fans because it was the first time, Atlanta, they had, been historically bad and then they were good. And this was right in the middle of that. So yes, the home run era brought it back, but also having teams that either hadn't won in a while or were winning, for the first time also helped.
Yeah, that's very true. You got these new teams coming up, and then old teams that are now good again, like the Orioles. I still remember '96 ALCS Game 1, Jeffrey Mayer catching that ball that should have been caught by the Orioles, but it went into the little 10-year-old kid catches it, robbing the Orioles of the game essentially and the series over the Yankees. I really want to know what happened to that Jeffrey Mayer kid. I wonder what he's up to now.
What is he up to now?
I have no idea.
I thought you were saying that with like a nod and a wink, like it was some big thing.
No. I mean, I don't know. He might be doing fantastic right now. I don't know.
And by the way, I'm not saying that era was the best necessarily because of the home run stuff in the late 90s. And what I mean by PED era, I call 96, and they were doing it well before, of course, Oakland in the late 80s. But the true PED era, I say, is like 96 to 2008 or so. But just look at how great baseball was then. It was colorful. It was in one of those stretches where everything was bigger than the game, it seemed like. New York and the Red Sox finally, for a long stretch, were both good again. And Baltimore was right there in the late 90s. And you know what? If Baltimore was able to get one of those World Series in that little 3-year run, things might have completely changed because I think the Angelo family would have put more money into them, all that kind of stuff. But the Red Sox replaced them, and then you had Cleveland. They were kind of bouncing up. It was a fun time for baseball, in my opinion. And then, you add the home runs, that just made it even better to me.
You had a lot of great individual players, and in
Yes.
this country, the individual star is going to always bring in people. There's like a worship, if you will, of these players like Albert Bell, your Frank Thomas. In the 2000s, you could say Manny Ramirez to an extent. But yeah, so McGuire and Sosa, obviously. And then toward the end of the 90s, Barry Bonds. It was just a lot of these great individual talents, especially like Roger Clemens in the early 2000s, who was doing a lot of extraordinary things for someone of his age. I mean, seriously, like,
no, I mean, you're not wrong. Excuse me.
It was just amazing what he was able to do. I mean, obviously, he has some enhancers, but
let me ask y'all real quick. You set that up, so I'll start with you, Ryan, and we a lot of this right now we can also say is just going to be a repeat, but we're having fun doing this. But start with you, Ryan, and then you answer Noe. Ryan, how important to you is the whole PED thing? Like, do you care if somebody gets caught roiding up? Do you think it's a cheater and they should be kicked out forever? What are your thoughts on it?
Oh man, I don't know. I've never really looked at it as, I mean, I think cheating might be the wrong word. I think it might just be more of, you're breaking the rules, set by the league. I guess if it's one thing, it's just breaking the rules. I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing as long as like the player itself isn't like doing it to a crazy extent to where they're like hurting themselves or it's affecting with them. Because you look at like on the football side, you look at a guy like Bill Romanowski. He took steroids and that dude was crazy, And if I think when it comes to the baseball side though, I don't know if it really affected many of the players that way. Like I know the top guys that you think of when you think of the steroid era, you think of guys like Mark McGuire and Canseco and guys like that. And at least for me personally, I've never heard many stories of them being, insane or, locker room cancers or anything like that. But I'm not really opposed to it. I mean, I guess it's one of those things to where it's a rule posted by the league, so you can't do it. But I think as long as it's not like unhealthy for the player itself and the people around them, I don't really have a problem with it.
Man, it's such a good question. There's a morality aspect to
Yeah.
it
Why?
because these players are damaging their bodies and living shorter lives as a
That's
result of
true.
taking these
Okay.
unnatural enhancers.
Okay.
That are,
I want to stop you right there just real quick. Now, please understand, people, I'm not trying to say that this man did anything bad, but on top of what you just said today, of course, Larry Allen, former Cowboy great, passed away at 52 suddenly. We have no reason why. We don't know why. But I'm going to go back and ask you ask Larry Allen at 20 years old, here is your life, but you're going to be cut short because you're going to do things that'll hurt your body, but you choose. And what is everybody going to choose? The
at,
gloriful life.
at 20 years old, a
Yeah.
kid that's from Sonoma State University,
Mhm.
yeah, he's going to choose, oh, yeah, I'll live the next 32 years of my life if I
Mhm.
can be a Hall of Famer and win a ring.
And I just going back to the health thing, because I agree, but I mean, at the end of the day, that's up to that person, whether they want to take it or not, knowing the risks and all that.
For the fan, it's great because you see this marvel of talent.
Yeah.
And to me, even during this time period, Paul Sorrento was the strongest, like the one hitter that could scare anybody.
Jay
Because
Buhner for me.
Jay Buhner's a good one.
I think Jay Buhner got actually implicated. What's the other guy that was in Travis Hefner?
Oh yeah, Travis Hefner. Yeah, he
That
was
dude,
later, wasn't he, or was he during that time period?
he was the first baseman on that first Indians team, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay,
I thought that was like his
Hefner?
rookie or second year. But anyway, but no, you're right. I'm just saying, like, the health thing and the morality thing. I thought you were going to talk about, like, I get it, what you mean by the health of the body. I'm talking about, it annoys me how baseball purists, I don't even know what that means anymore, how they'll wink and nod about Gaylord Perry, about Whitey Ford, about players that got caught cheating, legitimately cheating or breaking the rules, but cheating. They'll wink and nod about them all the way to the Hall of Fame, but then they're going to try to knock a dude that wants to improve his game so that he can get paid more. They're going to knock him and say that they can't be, Hall of Famers and stuff. That's where I get frustrated, because to me, the bigger effect on the game would be the people who are actually cuffing the ball, doing things like that affect the actual physical game of play, over a dude who might hit 10 more home runs than he would have any other time because he took PEDs. So I think that's the thing that I struggle with, because I don't understand the big deal about that. I don't know. And again, I go back to
so it's more about hypocrisy for you.
well, yeah, pick a lane on either one. Now, for me personally, I'm a wink and the nod for all of it. I think it's all a great story after. That just like we found out that the I'm trying to think of the Giants win the pennant home run. We find out, the team was stealing signal.
Bobby Thompson.
Yeah, Bobby Thompson's home run. We find out later that they were stealing the signs. That doesn't change it to me. That makes it even cooler. I mean, to me, that makes it cooler that they cheated and won and bucked the system. That's a funnier story.
Yay, Astros.
Huh?
Yay, Astros.
Hey, you and I talked about this. My only issue I had with the Astros is once they got caught, how they acted. Like, you got caught. Dude, smile, take it. Say, hey, you know what? We apologize. We're going to be cool. Don't then try to act all snobbish and like, how dare you? Nah, just accept it and move on.
Hey, this was my point the whole time. If I was in their shoes, I would be okay with paying the $4+ million. I'd be okay with losing my draft picks as long as you don't take away the World Series.
Yep.
I don't care.
Yep.
If this happened to the Rangers, I wouldn't care.
I wouldn't either.
I'd be like, crown us. We're still champs. It happened to the Cowboys. I'd be like, crown us. I wouldn't even care what Stephen A. Smith would have to say. Crown us. We are the champions. I care.
Totally agree. So when you get caught, just accept it. Be contrite. Just I think that's all anybody ever wants when you get caught. Just be contrite. I don't even care if you wink and nod as you say it and you, oh sure, I won't do it again. That's fine. That's the cat and mouse part of baseball. You walk to the edge as far as you can And sometimes you step over that edge of cheating, and then it's up to the game to pull you back. That's how it should always be.
My only issue with any of it, if we're being like very fair about it, is you're setting a precedence that you can commit a crime but still not really be punished. To me, the real punishment is losing your championship.
I don't. If so, the cheating part goes to like steroids for me.
Yeah.
You can't prove to me that the cheating is the only reason they won. I don't want championships taken away because you get caught cheating. I mean, unless we're talking about like you're paying the other team to not perform, that kind of cheating or something like that. Or like when St. Louis got in trouble because they hacked the Houston Astros emails. That's different. Okay, that's taking it to an espionage level. But just on the field stuff, I don't ever want a title taken away for because of cheating.
There is a movie made about that too with the White Sox, if I'm not mistaken. I think that happened a long time ago. I don't know what decade it was.
What, the Black Sox scandal, 1919?
That one, that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, the Black Sox.
God, he makes me feel so old, Noe.
I thought he was gonna say Field of Dreams.
No,
no, 8 Men Out.
Well, just because of they referenced the Black Sox scandal there.
Yeah, Shoeless Joe. But yeah, you're talking about 8 Men Out.
Yeah, 8 Men Out. Great movie.
Yeah, it really is. It's a really good movie.
So I was gonna say something and dadgummit. Anyway, go ahead and continue. I'll try to remember.
Yeah, what were you about to say about that, Ryan?
I was just saying when we were talking about like conspiracy level of cheating that warrants something getting taken away. I'm not sure. I haven't seen 8 Men Out, but like isn't the whole story like they were, I don't know, collaborating with like, I don't know if it was the mafia or some kind of sports gambling thing.
So how it worked is the owner of Chicago White Sox was notorious about being a cheapskate. He wouldn't honor bonuses. Apparently when they won pennants and stuff, like he would send them flat champagne. He wouldn't even, it was stuff that had been used because I think he owned some bars. But anyway, and so they notoriously were underpaid. And this was what you would have called a super team. This was a pretty damn good team that if under the right payroll and circumstances could have easily ran off 4 or 5 World Series in a row. And they were notorious for hating each other too. But basically a couple players got told by a bookie, like, throw the World Series and we'll basically pay you 3 times of what you're supposed to get paid. Now, the problem is they didn't have the wherewithal to ask for money up front. And so they started doing that, and they did throw the World Series allegedly, because they were found innocent in a court of law. But they did throw the World Series, and they only got like 20% of what they ever would have got because the bookies were, they weren't going to ever pay it. So yeah, you need to watch the movie. It takes a more, I don't want to call it comedy view of it, but it takes a more innocent view of it. It's not a lot of it's not a lot about the slimy part. Everything's done in like that, even though it was made in 94, I think it's kind of shot as a 40s style. So like when the gangster calls the thing, it's, hey there, Charlie, I've got the great deal for you. They're ready to throw the series, that kind of stuff. So it's not like a grimy, I'd love to see somebody do a grimy version where they go to that. Cause I'm not saying the players were right, but again, they weren't paid. And then Shoeless Joe Jackson, he still has not, he's not in the Hall of Fame because of that. And there's, some people say he didn't know about it. Some people did. The problem is he was such a great player that even though in the World Series he hit like 360 and played great, but it wasn't quite as good as he normally plays. So there was a little bit of doubt. And so it's a great movie and it's a great story. And to be honest with you, the 1994 strike is probably the second. That's still to me the darkest day of baseball. And then the strike is probably second. And maybe the strike goes over simply because the owners easily could have not had any of this happen. I think the owners hoped that they would throw this strike, they would bring replacement players in, and everybody wouldn't care. Nobody would care. And so, they thought that was going to be the thing. And I'm going to tell you what I think won the day is I think the baseball people Sparky Anderson was suspended for a year because he would not do this. He's
He
like,
refused.
I am not going to do it. But I think what saved baseball was they actually listened to their coaches and their managers and their scouts. And when they're telling them, if you do this, baseball is dead. If you run out with these guys, this is going to be such ugly baseball. Because again, I'm not saying baseball is the most athletic, but I'm saying the edge of greatness or even average major leaguer to okay, good minor league player, that gap is the biggest gap there is in all of sports. It's just such a mental game, but also just the physical skills that are required for it are so intense. And so I
think about right currently with Jackson Holiday, 20-year-old phenom. He's the minors, comes into the majors. He ain't ready.
Yep.
He will. 4 years from now, he'll be an all-star. He's just not ready yet.
Yep. And Wyatt Langford. And Wyatt Langford's the difference is Wyatt Langford still has never looked overpowered. I think a lot of Langford stuff has just been baseball luck. But even Wyatt Langford, you could point to him. And it's such a gap. That's why when you inside baseball, you'll hear the term a 4A player. A 4A player is that in between. They're tearing up 3A. There's to the point where there's no point of having them on the team because minor leagues aren't about winning. It's about developing. And so there's no point of him being on a roster, but when you bring him up to the MLBs, he's just not quite good enough to be a consistent player. And so I think the owners listened to their managers in 95 and they were telling them, and I used to do a radio show in Shreveport, Louisiana, and we got to talk to Ken Rosenthal every week. And if you don't know who Ken Rosenthal is, folks, he's just one of the premier baseball guys. I think when Peter Gammon retired, Rosenthal kind of stepped in and became that guy. But he talked about a lot of the managers were begging their owners, like, this cannot go on. And so the owners listen, but man, I just don't understand why they thought they had to do all this to get to there. I don't understand labor issues. I'm not going to pretend I'm into that complexity, but sometimes it's just kind of scratching your head on the outside looking in going, what are y'all doing?
I mean, they could have looked at the 87 strike in football and maybe thought they would have had similar results. Maybe. I don't know. That is a good point. I can't think of what the mindset was 30 years ago.
Football is different in that you don't get 162 chances to see your team each year. So in the NFL, you get 16, 17 now, eventually 27 apparently. But in college, you get 12, and in high school, minimum 10. But that might be it. And so it's easier to forgive that sport because you only get it for a short time of the year. And it's intense, and you try to stay away, just like the Colin Kaepernick. I do believe there are people that actually did stop watching football during all that, but I guarantee you at least 90% of them are probably back because football is just different. Baseball,
the ratings haven't dropped that much.
Yeah. And then even in the dip was also a year before they started doing better streaming stats. They still weren't even counting streaming stats in that supposed dip year. But anyway, baseball, on the other hand, you have played with the hearts of fans so many times with so many different work stoppages. I don't know. I don't know. Baseball is extremely lucky for steroids, to be honest with you. I know we're going to bring that up in the next show, but honestly, I don't know if baseball is baseball today without the steroid era.
Oh man, you want to go with that one, Ryan?
Yeah. I mean, again, like I said earlier, I think the steroid era did save baseball, and there's a lot of guys that, there's probably more of an emphasis on, swinging for the fences and getting runs across the board, more so than just putting the ball in play and trying to get guys from base to base and getting guys, across the plate playing small ball. You don't see as much of that now as you would probably back in the day. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, it's more of a home run, swing for the fences type deal now. You have a lot of guys. You probably have at least one or two players from each team hitting 20 home runs every season. And that's not something you used to see back in the day.
It does feel like, yeah, you're right. Because I can remember like when the Rangers had 420 homers through their hitting, it was like, oh my God, this was one of the great things about, what the Rangers are doing. But I will say this year, it doesn't feel like it feels like we're starting to kind of swing back into guys are willing to take it to the other side. If they're willing to take it into the gap, they're not necessarily swinging from the hills quite as much. But yeah, you're 100% right. We are definitely in the middle. But back then, it didn't feel this robotic. When Sammy and all them were doing it, maybe because everybody else was still playing normal baseball and they were just outliers in that one department, it didn't feel like we were just a stand and watch game like we are right now.
Yeah. No, yeah. I see what you mean. No, I guess right with today's game.
Yeah.
When I'm thinking about it, I really like what they're doing with the pitch clock. Like with the games are shorter. I like that. So it seems to me that they're trying new things to bring people in, and I think it is working. I think attendance has been going up. I think viewership has been going up. Uh, I guess it's hard for me to think about today just because the whole TV contract issue this past offseason, it lowered the spending in baseball by about like $1 billion. And most of that money that was spent this offseason was going to two players.
Yeah.
For the Dodgers, Yamamoto and Otani.
And
So,
this is one of the few years where Boris overplayed his hand.
yeah.
And see, and this isn't, and I don't have a problem this year with Texas saying, you know what, we're just not doing it this year. And by the way, look at everybody that everybody wanted the Rangers to sign, and literally none of them are having good years. So again, goes back to the Cowboys and free agency. When you really look at free agency, unless you're getting an upper tier, usually it doesn't work out. It just doesn't for whatever reason. But I understand the owners this year saying, hey, you know what? We just can't. We're going to have to figure out our TV stuff because that was the other thing I was going to contradict you, Ryan, about ticket prices. Folks, the ticket price has nothing to do with player salary. The ticket price has nothing to do with player salary. TV contracts pay the salaries. That's why the owners get scared when the TV contracts are going to be bad. You don't see them worried that attendance is kind of some years. They're fine with that. It's the TV money that pays salaries. So the ticket prices are going to rise no matter what. But for that side, I understood. Your TV money's gone. You don't have the money, so just take a step back. But that's usually the only time I'm following with the owners. And I think for the most part, the players understood that, except for Scott Boras. And that's just what he does. That's his job. He goes for the blood. And unfortunately for this year, and this has happened a couple other times, I think he lost some street cred because none of his guys got big contracts. And somebody like Jordan Montgomery's begging basically Texas, just offer me anything. I want to bet you that Scott Boras was shutting down any of the offers that he didn't feel. He was never bringing them to Jordan Montgomery. And I'm not saying that that's some big conspiracy. That's how agents work. That's what they're supposed to do. But other than that, I don't think it's a bad thing that the payrolls take a little step back, because we're starting to get some $100 million guys that you're like, really? Like, I mean, he's good, but really? And so I think
Chris
it's a
Bryant.
natural time. Huh?
Chris Bryant.
Well, yeah. I mean, at least Chris Bryant has some skins on the wall.
Well,
World
yeah.
Series. Yeah.
But like, for me, it's just, I think baseball's in an okay place. They've got to get the television deals down. It's time to stop with these blackout rules. That's the one thing. They've got to first off, I think it's time to stop with blackout rules in general, period. Okay. Again,
There was a need for it
at a
time. But yeah, now, I agree with you. Now it's really not necessary.
Because again, ticket prices don't go up or down because of the payroll. They're not going to lose a ton of money if the game's on TV, even if the even if the attendance is not at 100%. And that's more towards the NFL, because baseball, you show them no matter what. I don't understand. They said that Amazon offered a deal and they turned them down, but then they kind of took it, and they're going to talk to them later. What I have a feeling is Amazon's going to say, let us be your streaming arm. We will carry the rights for every team. We will hire we will run it as part of MLB baseball, but as Amazon, because Amazon has the server space to stream all that. It wouldn't shock me if it went to streaming only at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I think you get that figured out, then you can start moving forward with where these teams payroll wise and stuff like that are going to be.
Yeah, and with the television deal thing, that and going back to the strike in that respect, the strike had a big impact on the television impacts for Major League Baseball, following the strike in that time, because after the 93 season, they ABC and NBC kind of came together for a nationwide coverage deal for Major League Baseball, and it was called the Baseball Network.
Yeah.
Whenever the strike happened, ABC was supposed to host the or cover the entire World Series. So 2 weeks of World Series coverage, and the NBC had majority of the regular season Major League broadcast. They lost almost $600 million in advertising revenue as a result of the strike, and that kind of deteriorated Major League Baseball's partnership with NBC and ABC, at least at the time, because they opted out of their deal because of that huge loss after the 95 season. And then in 96, Fox Sports stepped up and became the premier, nationally, televising Major League Baseball games. And that happened in 96, and Fox has been the premier, nationwide broadcasting for Major League Baseball ever since. That's where you see the ALCS. That's where you see the World Series every year.
Yeah, and that was one of the only good offshoots of the strike, was that I don't think that it ever goes to Fox if there's no strike. And Fox revitalized baseball. Again, it helped because of what was happening, and again, where the early 2000s especially, which, we all think now only the McGuire and Sosa and then Barry Bonds, but 2004 is still very much the hot center of PEDs being used in the sport. I mean, very much still the hot center. But I don't think that I don't know if the sport thrives on NBC and ABC, because Fox, being new, had a lot of young people running it who had a better thumb on the 90s when it came to graphics. And, we all joke about robot football, but look how long robot football has been around now for Fox. He's literally become an icon. Because and in the 90s, and I was a younger guy when it came out, I thought it was goofy as hell. But then talking to like my cousin who's 10 years younger than me, so at that time he was like 14, all his friends loved robot football for Fox. And so Fox had that and all that. They were younger, so they had just a better tone in it. And baseball between 1998 and 2008, it felt younger. It didn't feel like old baseball. It felt like it was in the middle of the cultural zeitgeist, with the Red Sox and the Yankees basically becoming the early 80s version of the Lakers and the Celtics, where the whole nation, you picked a side. Even if you hated both teams, you still picked a side.
Let me give y'all some backstory here, because this is my realm here. This is where I'm the expert.
He's about to say, hi, I'm Noe. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Noe.
Yes. Today is day one of sobriety. No, so in 87, Fox was created. That's how recent it is. Fox is only 7 years old, and they just got the NFC in 94. This is all pretty brand new for them.
Yep.
I still remember as a kid, because my parents allowed me to watch Married with Children at the time. I remember the episode where a lot of the baseball players were on there because of the strike. And Ryan, if you never watched Married with Children, I suggest that you watch it all. It is, if you don't have Hulu, I will give you my Hulu information. I'll watch all 11 seasons.
I do have Hulu, so I'll watch it. That's my homework for tonight.
It's pretty freaking funny, dude.
But there was an episode where all the baseball players were on there as a guest. It was during the strike. Joe Morgan was on there. Brett Saberhagen, two-time Cy Young winner. Frank Thomas, the Big Hurt. It was Danny Tartable. He was the kind of guy that I really liked.
Tartable.
Yeah, he just had the unique name. I really liked him in the early to mid-90s.
He could hit the ball a ton.
Yes. Yeah, a good power player, power bat for the Yankees during this
He
time
was
period.
in the barrel-chested softball-looking era for some of those home run hitters.
Yeah, yeah. That is a good description. But yeah, there was a good episode on that where Al Bundy, he's starting a league because people want to watch baseball.
That's a great episode.
Hockey was on strike around this time as well.
Yep.
So yeah, 10 years before, or 10 years, yeah, 10 years before the '04 strike, there was a '94 strike in baseball, and yeah, it was a really fun episode. I recommend you watch it. Just look it up, and yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. But yeah, so Fox was to go back to the point. Fox was pretty young at this time, so this is kind of very ambitious on them to take
And-
on football, and then also take on baseball a couple years later.
And going back to like that Fox robot thing, I never really found it, like strange or weird. I don't know how recently. I know they don't really do it now, or they might have done it recently. I'm not really sure. But when they bring the robot, like at midfield when they're doing the coin toss, I always thought that was kind of goofy. I don't know how recent it's been since they
You
last
know that
did
was CGI though, right?
No, I mean I think in the early days they had a guy in an actual suit walking out there. And I
You're
mean, I
gonna
know
have to prove that. That's a new rule here on the show. If you make a wild claim, one of the other people can say, "Prove it." And so before the next episode, you've got to show me proof. No, but you are in that age group. I mean, what year were you born?
2000.
So yeah, you were kind of in that age group because in 2010 the look had cleaned up, but it still felt like a lot like the 90s NFL Fox. What's wrong, buddy?
Ryan, how are you and what are you drinking? We never asked you.
Oh yeah.
This is OutDrank The Coverage. I'm so sorry. It's Terry's fault. I'm sorry.
I'm
I'm
sick.
doing good, Noe. I had me a Coors Banquet.
Oh, how was that?
It's my favorite beer.
Okay.
I don't know if y'all are big beer guys, but
He is.
I love beer. I love Coors Banquet especially, but that's my go-to for sure. But yes, Coors Banquet, and I am doing fantastic. Thank you.
By the way, congratulations to the Lady Longhorn softball team as they beat Stanford 1-0 to go to, I think they are now in the champion bracket awaiting the winner of Oklahoma, Florida. So that's
Oklahoma's a powerhouse.
Well, Florida beat Oklahoma today though. So
wow.
Yeah. So they play again and the winner of that advances to play Texas. Of course, OU and Texas finished 1-2 in the Big 12 softball league this year. Oklahoma's good, but this is not an Oklahoma team of Oklahoma. I mean, Oklahoma is the Pittsburgh Steelers, Dallas Cowboys, New England Patriots, San Francisco 49ers, Lakers, Yankees, every powerhouse, roll it into one. And that's just the start of the Oklahoma softball dominance. It even as a Longhorn fan, you're just in awe of it. That's the one sport, and I think this is where I give both of these schools credit. That's the one sport Texas doesn't really talk a lot of shit to OU because even when we're beating them, it's because it's like we don't want to make you too mad. We beat you, but go over there. But anyway, so congratulations to them. I just want to throw that in.
Nice.
And speaking of, while we're talking about softball, this is at the high school level. So I know the Texas State Championships for softball just happened over the weekend. I don't know if y'all saw it. It was kind of circulating on social media. Weslaco played Waco Midway, and then I think Weslaco was down 9-3 heading into the bottom of the seventh, and then they hit a walk-off grand slam. I don't know if y'all saw that.
I just got a notification about it because I have a good friend that grew up there as a kid. And in a group thread, I got that. Yeah, Weslaco Conference 6A softball state champs.
Mm-hmm. A walk-off grand slam from a sophomore.
Isn't that every kid's dream when they watch baseball or softball, I guess, in this example? You want to, just like, again, I was spoiled. I started watching sports in '93. Philadelphia versus Toronto, the second ever World Series, and I think still the second ever World Series, where it ended on a walk-off home run. That is a kid's dream. And then this is a walk-off grand slam. That's like the ultimate. Amazing.
After being down 9-3 going into the final inning, that's unbelievable.
I have another softball comment.
Sorry, I was getting quiet because I wanted to pull this up.
Oh, you found it.
Yeah, I found it.
All right.
Oh.
And there it goes.
Yep, that's it.
Oh.
Golly,
The
that's
fans, I love it. Look at the fans, man. They're just getting into it.
Well, and also, I don't know how true this is, but multiple people are saying it. You know, apparently, and they were up 9-3, so I understand it. But apparently, after every out, fans were doing the wave to the losing fans and
Oh,
all,
wow.
and doing all that. And me and Noe are in the same sports group on baseball. I mean, in sports on Facebook. And I always joke with him when people start my team's up, even by a large score. Why do you talk shit when the game is still going?
Yep,
You
it's not
never
over.
talk until the last out because it just don't, man. I'm not even a superstitious person, but just don't poke the spiritual bear. That's all I'm saying, folks. Just shut up. Like Laura Miller, don't be telling people we're going to plan a parade before we fucking even won a game. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Anyway.
Dude, yeah, especially in basketball, you really can't do that.
Yeah.
Or don't maybe have your pretext text. I've never told you this, Noe. When I thought the Rangers were about to make that out, I had this book of a text about to send you just about what that meant to me as a kid and a fan and all that. And then St. Louis did like that priest did once and showed me all the dirty things, and it never was the same again. I think it's a good note to end it, don't you? Who's our sponsor, Ryan?
Well, we are presented by Grandeur Pest Solutions for the ODTC happy hours. Car Motor Company in downtown Cleburne is our title sponsor over at Texas 2 Seam, part of this baseball look back. And of course, as we mentioned over the last month, we are now partnered with Manscaped, and we have 2 codes at manscaped.com. If you use codes ODTC, or as you've seen on the screen for most of the show, 2SEAM, TWOSEAM, one word. If you use either of those codes at manscaped.com, you'll get 20% off plus free shipping. And while you're there, take a look at the Performance Package 5.0. You'll get a little bit of everything, including the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Groin and Body Hair Trimmer, the Weed Whacker 2.0 Ear and Nose Hair Trimmer. That one was my personal favorite. Crop Soother Ball Aftershave Lotion, and the Crop Preserver Anti-Chafing Ball Deodorant. It also comes
Hey, real quick.
Yeah.
Turn off the code real quick because I want to talk about the Manscaped thing.
Gotcha.
So, like right here, I shaved my head with the Manscaped before I used it anywhere else. Before y'all say anything, luckily my fiance reminded me the order that I'd probably want to do it in. But I did it, and this shaved my head as short as anybody that, because I do no guard. And if anybody don't mean that, means I literally blade it. This is shorter than any barber that I've ever had done it with equipment. And I use the body wash in the shower. It's awesome. I used the ball deodorant. I thought I wasn't going to like it because I don't like the idea. Usually when you put anything cream in a dark, sweaty place, it doesn't, but this works. Like it legitimately works. You know, I had no smell. And he's like, yeah, it smells great. I'm like, thanks, dude. And then he's like, could you please leave? I'm at my parents' house. I was like, hi, Mrs. Tedley. Hi, Mrs. Tedley. How y'all doing? It was really awkward. But anyway, but no, it works really good. So even if you're listening to this thinking, well, I don't do all that. Look at to me, the hardware is great, but what makes Manscaped awesome and what I'll keep going back to are the shampoos and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. Yeah, and then the clothing's good too. A part of that Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is the Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravos. Those are valued at $34.99, and they come free when you get the Performance Package 5.0, as well as the Shed 2.0 toiletry bag valued at $39.99. That also comes free when you get the Performance Package 5.0 at manscaped.com. And again, if you use codes 2SEAM or ODTC, you'll get 20% off plus free shipping. And that comes with any order, whether you get the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra or anything else that catches your eye at manscaped.com. Go ahead and use our code. It helps the show out, helps OutDrank The Coverage, Texas 2 Seam, and everyone here at L4 Media. Just And it helps you out as well, saving 20% off. And it's not just your first purchase thing. Any purchase, you get 20% off plus free shipping when you use either of our codes. So huge shout out again to our sponsors, Manscaped, Car Motor Company, and Grandeur Pest Solutions. And thanks to all of you guys for tuning in to our first baseball look back. I had a great time talking with you guys. It was a fun topic. Again, not one I lived through, but it was really cool to see and hear you guys talk about your experiences, seeing it firsthand. So I had a lot of fun with you guys today.
Well, thank you. Next time we'll talk about the war of aggression from the north.
I had a great time. I think we
too,
could have
buddy.
talked about this for another 3 hours. So yeah,
Well, that's kind of what created the PED show we're going to do in August, is because we were just on our little Discord that we do with each other. We were getting so much into that part. It's like, well, okay, there's our next to look back for baseball. It kind of connected well, and it kind of we could kind of roll that into, maybe we start looking back at the first division winning Texas Rangers of the late 90s. That'd be kind of fun to extend this into the off season with that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And we are going to do our next look back will be in late July, early August and we will do the steroid era. And that kind of goes into the 96 Rangers team, the first team to win the AL West. And we will talk about those as well. And also when the MLB All-Star game is going on, I think it's July 16th or 17th. It's during
16th.
that week, the 16th. And then the Home Run Derby will be on the 15th. We'll have a kind of a live watch along while the All-Star game is going on, kind of talk about our favorite All-Star memories.
Yeah, we're going to have some highlights play because we can't show the game.
Yes.
So we're going to have some, but it's going to be a look back and a watch at the All-Star party. And you'll get to hear old man me bitch about them not wearing their own uniforms and all that, probably to the point where y'all have to mute me, because that is the thing. That's the one thing in sports right now that I'm the most angry about. I'm not lying, is the fact that and I get it, it's money, but still, I don't like not seeing every team's original uniforms in the All-Star game. That's the way it should be.
Yeah, and it will be the first All-Star game in Arlington since the 1995 season. So that'll be cool as well to see the Home Run Derby and the All-Star game both played at Globe Life Field. And we hope you'll join us as you watch along with us for the All-Star game. Again, that'll be July 16th. We'll be live watching that right here on YouTube, Facebook, and all of our platforms. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, of course, we'll keep you updated as time goes along as well. But our next probably straight up look back will probably be on the steroid era, which we touched a little bit on in today's show, but we'll go more in depth on that one probably in early August, and then that'll kind of roll into another look back on the 1996 Texas Rangers. So keep an eye out for that as well. We'll keep you updated on all of our social media platforms, which are listed in the description below. If you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening to us later on the podcast, they'll be in the description on that one, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all of our platforms there as well. So thanks again for tuning in to the first OutDrank The Coverage baseball look back. And a quick one other programming note. I will be out of town next weekend. I'll be out in West Texas seeing an old friend. So there will not be a Texas 2 seam next Monday, but we are working on getting some interviews from a couple former Ranger players, and we'll keep you updated on those as well. But no Texas 2 seam next week. And will you guys be having a happy hour next Monday night?
Yes, and it looks like we'll get to have kind of a fun random one. We'll probably, of course, talk the Mavericks.
Yes.
We'll talk the Stars and where their season ended. We'll see where the Rangers are at that point. I know we have, Larry Allen will probably be a prominent part of that. I've already started putting together a highlight package for him because, I was trying to think.
When I think of him, I think of that play where, oddly enough, Troy Aikman threw an interception.
Yeah, the Darian Connor play against the Saints.
Darian Connor, Larry Allen chases him down.
Yep.
And he didn't even have the angle. But I think, guys, I'm trying to think. It was Mark Tuinei passed.
Mm-hmm.
Is he the second one of the prominent? He's the second one of that group that has died.
Gogan's still alive. Stepnoski's still alive. Nate Newton's for some reason still alive. He should have
lost all the weight. And we don't know what killed Allen, but it does, honestly, he was in vacation in Mexico. My first two thoughts were, a heart issue or fentanyl.
Mm.
I was thinking a heart issue, just because he
I'm
was
thinking
with
a heart
family.
issue. Yeah. Well, but I'm just talking about fentanyl. Like, there are people that are thinking they're getting a friend's like, oh, I got a Vicodin, and you got a headache, I got a Vicodin, let me give it to you. And it turns out, oh, I didn't tell you, I bought that on the street, from Joe the barber.
Yeah.
Joe the barber's got to stop doing drugs. Anyway, but yeah, we're gonna do a happy hour. Barring any big news, I think we'll get to have fun and do one of our 2 or 3 hour, just kind of bounce around sports and movies and stuff. And then we're going to be recording in 2 weeks our OutDrank the Coverage and look back at the number 2 rival for the Dallas Cowboys. And finally, after an unplanned long break, we're going to be talking a bad movies and a drink episode any given Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely my favorite football movie of all time, and I used to hate it. So we'll talk about all that. So you can check that out on OutDrank the Coverage on YouTube at L4 Media. Our Facebook is just type in OutDrank the Coverage.
So a lot of things going on, of course, coming up, a lot of content coming up on L4 Media, as well as OutDrank the Coverage. So keep an eye on that as well. Of course, we'll keep you updated on social media. Again, all the links are listed below, and we'll keep you updated as the weeks go on about all the content that we'll have coming up for you on L4 Media and OutDrank the Coverage. But again, one more time, thank you guys for joining us on our first baseball look back. One more quick thanks to our sponsors, Car Motor Company, Grandeur Pest Solutions, as well as Manscaped. Again, 20% off plus free shipping when you use codes 2SEAM or ODTC at manscaped.com. Terry, Noe, thank you guys, and thanks for everyone for tuning in, and we will talk to you next